Yeah, did you I know Dad didn't rewatch them all. Did you rewatch all the trilogy? Or
Literally 5 minutes ago, I was watching the second one, but
hmm,
I watched the first one yesterday and the second one literally just now. And I watched the third one so many times because that's
of
my favorite
course.
one. So
Hmm.
I got
It's
that one
that's a
down.
popular opinion these days.
It is.
Hmm. Welcome to Pulp Diction. I'm your host, Dylan Gibson. But yeah, I guess it's been a minute since I've done had to do an intro, I guess. So I guess I'll just get started. Welcome back to Pulp Diction.
Wow.
I,
Almost forgot
for-
your own title.
I did forget my own title.
You did. That's hilarious. I love it.
I can edit it in post. I'm not going to. It's funnier if I don't. Uh, Welcome back to Pulp Diction. I'm your host, Dylan Gibson. I'm joined again by my dad, John Gibson, and returning guest, Emma Joe. And it's been a minute for, I mean, any episode, but especially since you've been in one, Emma Joe.
Yeah, I missed the last episode, but other than that,
Hmm.
it's been a minute.
Yeah. And yeah, today we're gonna be discussing the Star Wars prequel trilogy movies, episodes one, two, and three. Uh, I do want to start doing like introductions for the movies because I feel like in the past we've just kind of jumped into it. But I feel like for something like this, like it's Star Wars, you know?
Right.
Does it need an introduction? But I don't know. Like, I mean, most people know by now, like four, five, and six came out in the late 70s to early 80s. And then decades later, Lucas came out with episodes one, two, and three in between 1999 and 2005, I think.
Hmm.
So they were met with very mixed reception at the time. But I do think it's interesting how, as the years have passed, the public opinion on these movies seems to have pretty dramatically shifted to the point where a lot of people say like episode three is their favorite in the whole series. Like Emma Joe, you were just saying your favorite is episode three, and like, do you have any particular reason for that aside from like Hayden Christensen being hot?
Listen, I don't even like Hayden Christensen that much. Like, he's all right. I'm all
More
for
of an
Ewan
Ewan
McGregor.
McGregor?
I'm for Ewan.
Yeah.
But I don't even know why I like it so much. That's the thing. I think it's just like kind of easier for me to follow. Like when I watched them for the first time, just the third one was just so much easier. Like
Hmm.
with Anakin turning to the dark side and the whole Order 66 thing, like I was following along like
Hmm.
easily. But literally like watching episode one and two for the second time, I was like actually understanding things like I've never noticed before, like first time watching. But like first time I watched episode three, I understood everything for some reason. So
Right.
I guess this is why I like that one a whole lot more. I don't know why.
I do think episode three is like easily the best of the prequels. I mean,
Hmm.
most people think that, but I think they kind of came into their own in that one in what they were trying to do with it, like the political uh messaging behind it and the just make they finally make Anakin into Darth Vader, which was the goal for the entire trilogy. And I think they kind of throughout the trilogy, one of the biggest criticisms is the dialogue. Like it's very cringy and cheesy a
Mm,
lot of the time, especially with Anakin. Like flirting with Padme. I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it's been memed to oblivion.
yes.
And it's well deserved. But I think they kind of hit that balance in Revenge of the Sith, where it's campy, like it's Star Wars, it's campy dialogue, but it's not like so bad you cannot at all take it seriously, you know? And I
It,
do,
it, yeah, go ahead.
okay, I do think they did kind of start to have some of that in episode two, because like most of the dialogue's awful, it is horrendous, but some of it is like straight up Shakespearean. Like Anakin says something like, "I'm haunted by the kiss I never should have given you." And I hear that, I'm like, "Hello?" Who who gave him the permission to write all these bad lines and then something as good as that?
I'd be very curious to look and see if people started liking the prequel trilogy after the sequels came,
I think that
because
was
it's
a part
all
of it.
relative, to be honest with you. I mean, the when you see how bad the sequels are, you realize that the prequels were not as bad as you
Mhm.
thought they
Like the
were.
prequels
So
were the enemy until a greater enemy was found.
yeah,
Somehow Lord Palpatine returned.
Yeah. Well, that's a
well,
whole other episode.
Hmm.
and it speaks to just, I mean, I think Lucas tried to do too much too. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh,
it
absolutely.
started starting with episode one. It's like, well, let's make sure that we're scratching the fans itch. Let's make sure that we're scratching the kids itch. Let's make like, and so like you throw in Jar Jar Binks, who was like atrocious. I mean, which were, I mean, we you could go on about the dude, what Ahmad Best and his like suicidal tendencies after that whole thing, but
Yeah.
um,
Jake
but
Lloyd.
I mean, and they slowly started kind of whittling him out. He was he even in
Ahmed
Revenge of the
Best.
Sith? No, no, no,
He was in 2 and 3, I think. But
no, no, no.
his
Yeah, it
I'm
was
talking about
first,
like Jar Jar,
yeah,
Jar Jar,
Jar Jar
but
he
was
was
like
the
in
first and
minimally
second.
though.
Yeah, his
First
role
and
Okay,
was
second.
dramatically uh
reduced.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think you're right. Like some of the things that they came out of the gate swinging with in Phantom Menace, like they toned down. You also have to realize, like, see, neither of you were alive when episode one came out.
Does that
And
make you feel old?
oh geez, yeah, I already felt old. But here's the thing, like you're talking about something that had become an iconic culture, like
It's Star
cultural
Wars, you
icon, right?
know?
Like so over the course of 2 decades, there had always been some this folklore about like, okay, well, why does this start with episode four, like episode four, five, and six? Like you somewhere you knew that Lucas had in his closet one, two, and three, and so everyone waits 22 years before they finally get it. So I mean, the anticipation of something like that, and we know from the Marvel universe too, right? Like
Hmm.
when you when you withhold stuff, it's almost better. But then if you don't measure up after you've withheld it for that long, and like you basically screw the pooch on it, then I mean
It's
it's
unforgivable.
brutal. Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, like about how you have to kind of withhold something, I guess, to make it, which, it can work for and against you, and that the expectations build and build. But if you don't let people wait, then they're not going to be excited for it anymore. You look at Star Wars in recent years, they're just not letting it cook. They're
Breathe.
not letting it
Yeah.
simmer down a bit. They're just pumping out one thing after another. Star Wars and Marvel like, and they are finally realizing that, hey, maybe that's not a good idea, and they're changing
Right.
their business model. But yet the gap between the times the original and prequel trilogy were made, just allowed for so much to just Star Wars fans were starved of content for so long, aside from like books, video games. And so these come out, so their expectations are obviously through the roof. And you could argue that like no matter what, they weren't going to measure up. But I do think even from a modern standpoint, like Phantom Menace and Clones just do not, but like I love them with all my heart, but they're not good movies. They're not good movies. I'm sorry. It's
I
just
You
can't
know
even
what?
watch.
Yeah.
Like
It
I
would
can't.
be like watching sport. You could watch a Sports Center like highlight reel
Mm.
for and get the best of those two movies in like 30 minutes probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like almost everything good about the trilogy comes from Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars animated series. You know?
Mm.
like again, Revenge of the Sith is basically where they finally came into their own, where they were finally, doing everything, basically everything they intended to do. I think Lucas even like actually has some moments of decent direction in Sith. Like, there was one bit where Anakin's looking out. I want to say it's before he makes the decision to help Palpatine as he's like being attacked by Mace Windu. And you can see the sun setting, which is, very obvious symbolism. Uh like it's the end of Anakin Skywalker, basically. But yeah, all in all, just it is a shame that one and two aren't great because one especially was it's a mess. There's so much going on, and like they actually do so little with it. There are all these space politics shenanigans and jargon that just don't really mean anything. And uh I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rewatching the first one, I still don't even know what's going on
It's
in the movie. I have
yeah.
no clue.
It's one
I'm
of those
like,
movies that you feel more than you think about, I think.
right. See, I try to think about movies. That's my problem.
That's
Like,
the
I try
yeah.
to like, understand it
It's
more.
hard not to think about movies.
Ugh.
Yeah, and I when I was rewatching, I wrote in my notes like between one and two, I'm like George Lucas just isn't a great director. The colors and the cinematography and everything, it's just not terribly artistic. And then I wrote under that like I rescind this after rewatching episode three.
Yeah, I wrote down like the CGI and all of it, man. I
It's
just
I
can't get
respect what
over
he
it.
tried,
Like,
but
right. Like I look back at like all the movies in like 1999 and I'm like, okay, like it wasn't like the
mhm,
biggest time for it, but like come on, it was so bad. It was
yeah,
like
it like
I can't watch it
he
as
was
much.
trying to push the boundaries and a part of me respects that, but I'm also like the practical stuff worked so well for the originals. It was insane, and then he had to go mess with that too with the special editions.
Right.
But those worked so well, and it I don't know. I did say like the opening big chase sequence throughout Coruscant in Attack of the Clones. It is an absolute mess of CGI and just all sorts of stuff going on. But I also did think it was a very good way to establish like what kind of Jedi Anakin was and what kind of Jedi and what his relationship with Obi-Wan was like.
Mm.
You immediately get off the gate like between the time Phantom Menace and Clones has happened. Like he's become a Jedi, he's become very reckless, and he's very close with Obi-Wan. But at the same time, uh, Obi-Wan just kind of still sees him as a bit of a child, which he is internally. But I do think the character building is one of the highlights of the trilogy. It's one of the things it does well.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I mean, and you can go all the way back to Phantom Menace and see this. Like, I mean, it's why so many people criticize Jake Lloyd's performance too, right? In Phantom Menace, like I think it's almost overkill in some ways. Like, there's no subtlety at all
None.
about how Anakin's character is played and
Hmm.
the anticipation of who he will become. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I mean, I'm aging myself in this, but like the coolest poster for Phantom Menace that came out
One
as you're
with the
going to
shadow.
the theater was the Shadow one, right?
Mhm.
Like
Hmm.
you've got this little kid and the Shadow is Darth Vader. So like there's all this again, this anticipation building up that this guy is going to become Darth Vader. Sorry, spoilers, but if you don't know
Oh.
that, then you're an idiot.
Next you're gonna
But
tell me it's
anyway,
Luke's dad or something.
yeah. But like just the whininess that it's like oh my gosh um oh I was going to go in the Tashi station and buy some new power converters right from like New Hope. You get the whininess of Luke in episode 4 and then you like multiply that and that is Hayden Christensen in um in episode 2 and I'm
Yeah,
like
it's
was that necessary? I mean, I don't think it was. I
Mhm.
think you could have subtly. shown that the character was, like you said, that's a really good description, Dylan. Like he's reckless, right? And you can show his recklessness without letting him be like a little whiny. I
Hmm.
don't want to say the word. Emma Jo can say the word because she's free and clear. But
I'll say it. You know, he's a nerf herder. I'll say that.
who are you calling Scruffy? Scruffy.
But yeah, Anakin throughout is he's such a mixed bag because I do think his development turns out to be good, pretty good in the end. But like as the getting there, oftentimes in one and two mostly, it's kind of an issue. Like I appreciated his parts of his conversation with Padme, like when he's talking about his political ideals that very obviously lead to his later ones as Vader, and let's see what else. Uh his him talking about, I killed the men, not just the men, but the women and the children too. Like as much as that's another scene that's been memed a lot, I think that's another really good one that kind of
Oh,
led to like, it's very obvious foreshadowing. But
you talking about when he went to the
after,
sand,
yeah, he kills the sand
um,
people and then
sand
like
people? Yeah.
confesses to Padme, and it's
Well,
yeah.
and it's that also points towards Order 66 too,
Oh
right? I
yeah.
mean, going into the temple. But like that's a very different side of him than you see. Like there's the whiny little, you know, and
It's
then
almost like
there's
he was two different characters, It's
right, right. And over and over, I mean, you hear Yoda say, like fear leads to the dark side and anger leads to the dark side, all these other things. And I actually like think about that scene, just him going into the Sand People's like village and stuff. Like that was, I think, one of the more power. That was in two,
I
right?
agree. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
season
Yeah.
two.
two.
Yeah, I think that was one of the more powerful things because then you see that like something shifted
Mm-hmm.
in him. It's beyond like just being a whiner, and it's
Yeah.
moved to like, like real anger
Anger, hatred.
and
Fear leads
hatred
to
and
anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side, like Yoda
yeah,
said. And
yeah,
like he was afraid of losing his mom,
yep,
and because he was afraid of losing his mom, he was angry that he did lose her, and because he was angry that he did lose her, he hated the Sand People. So he killed he killed all of them, and it was the same cycle that led to him killing, the Jedi and everyone. When he was in episode 3, and it was a whole thing like because in episode 1, he promised to save his mom, and he obviously wasn't able to do that. And so I feel like I actually think Hayden Christensen, for as much criticism as he's gotten, he does a very good job of showing, like, kind of displaying without actually saying outright, like, he's never gonna let this happen again to somebody he loves, which is what spurs him on to not let it happen to Padme. And I think of everything episode 2 got wrong, that was a good part. That was a good part. I think the second half of Clones is dramatically better than the first half.
yeah. Well, and I think like we said, like it, not every element is bad. I
Yeah.
mean, there's some really, really like it's almost like what could somebody who is a really good director have done with all the pieces that you have in
Hmm.
all three of those? Because
Yeah.
like General Grievous, I mean, of course, you'd like his backstory a little bit more than just this
Hmm.
dude who shows up, but um, you know, Mustafar, I mean, that comes in three, right? And it just there's a lot of really cool elements,
Hmm.
but they weren't
Cohesive.
yeah, well, not only not cohesive, like they just other
This
than they're really cool, you didn't care a whole
Yeah,
lot.
the thing is, Lucas had he's a great idea man, and he's a great
Yes.
mythologist. But the thing is, in the prequels, he was surrounded by yes men who wouldn't like tell him what was a bad idea. So they'd let him go off and do whatever he wanted. He had a blank check. But in the originals, he had people to tell him no. He had other people other than himself directing these, and he had just it was a more collaborative effort overall, I think, where he wasn't, the end all be all of it. And some people have argued in recent years, like Filoni has had a similar issue. Dave Filoni, as he's been making all these shows like Ahsoka and stuff, and
Hmm.
he just hasn't had people saying anything to him.
I know also with like the like back with like the wanting more like General Grievous and stuff. I know
Hmm.
like I haven't seen Clone Wars like the show.
Hmm.
Um, but I know from what I've heard is like they kind of add more into with those characters with
Yeah.
Grievous and even like Darth Maul. Like I love like Darth Maul
The
in
stuff they do with
episode
Maul
one.
makes him one of the best characters in Star
He was
Wars.
so cool in the first episode and then he was just gone and
And
I
he
was
didn't really
like,
do anything. But Sam
right.
Witwer's performance, like if you had in as Darth Maul, like
Hmm.
even if you just watch the behind the scenes stuff of him without going into the actual show, he's so passionate. He gets so into it. You can see him just like getting all in character, like Kenobi. It's it's
Is he the
great.
voice
Sam
in
Sam Witwer, yeah.
yeah,
Well, he's
yeah,
not the voice in the movie, but he is in the show.
okay.
But
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean the Darth Maul, like Anakin, Qui-Gon, Darth Maul scene in Phantom
mhm.
Menace to me was worth the price of
Oh,
admission. Right?
100%. Like
Like
as much as I and everyone else will dog on the rest of Phantom Menace, I will never not smile like a little boy when I see like Darth Maul ignite the two. Pew, pew.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
well,
oh.
and like I said, I mean, look, I think back to Mr. AHS, right? Like that thing that you did with the lightsaber duel. I said, like, the thing about that lightsaber duel is that as soon as you hear those notes, I don't care who you are, if you've been living in a freaking cave, like you know what that is. Like, and if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. Like, I don't, I just, I will
Iconic
not,
in every
I
sense of
will
the
not
word.
apologize for that judgment. But yeah. I mean, Emma Joe's like, right? Like that music is
Oh
iconic.
yeah. Like I knew that even before I actually watched Star
Yeah,
Wars.
the music
I
is
only
so
started,
huge.
yeah. I started watching Star Wars last summer and like even like before then, I've always seen like so many like TikToks and Instagram stuff like all with like Star Wars things and I knew that song was like
Hmm.
that big moment. And when I actually watched it for the first time, I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Love it."
Yeah. It's great. I think the music is another like one of the giant highlights for the trilogy. Like you
Oh
got
my
Duel of
gosh.
the Fates, Battle of the Heroes slash
Across the
Anakin versus
stars.
Obi-Wan. Across the Stars, I was about to say, is insanely good.
Beautiful.
Just one thing after another. John Williams, uh, he doesn't miss. Not often, anyway.
He's one of my favorites.
Hmm. But yeah, and Duel of the Fates is interesting too, because not just in Phantom Menace, but I'm pretty sure. Hold on, where did I Duel of the? It plays 3 times. Yeah, it plays 3 times in the trilogy, once in each movie. Obviously, the first one when it's Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul, and but I think all three. It also happens in Episode 2 when Anakin's on the speeder
Emperor.
and he's going over
Oh,
to find his mother,
Oh,
save her from the Tuskens.
yeah.
And a third time, Duel of the Fates starts playing during the fight. Uh, well, the two final fights intercut: Obi versus Annie and Yoda versus Palpatine. And all three of these moments are very like fateful. I mean, it's fateful moments. It's the Duel of the Fates. They're very character defining moments, fate defining moments for not just Anakin, but for the galaxy. Well, it's defining the fate of Anakin, and in doing that, it's defining the fate of the galaxy as a whole. Because, and Dave Filoni explains the Duel of the Fates a lot better than I could, but I think the gist of it was Qui-Gon is fighting Darth Maul so he can mentor Anakin and be the father figure that he needs, because that is what he needs. He didn't grow up with one. And because Qui-Gon's not like the other Jedi. He like cares about people. He's not afraid to be passionate. And that's the kind of person Anakin needed, right? So of course Qui-Gon dies, which is gonna shape his fate forever because he gets Obi-Wan, who does a good job like being his mentor, but he's more of a brother figure than a father figure, which is good for him, but it's not what he needed. And then in episode 2, on the way to find Shmi Skywalker, it's obviously another very character defining moment because, like I said earlier, like she dies despite his promise to save her, and that motivates him. Like he'll never see anyone he loves die again. He makes that promise to himself, and it shapes Anakin and again the galaxy in conjunction. And finally, the third final fight, it's I mean I think that's pretty obvious in how it defines all the characters here. Like the fate of the galaxy is in the balance. Obi-Wan versus Anakin. Obi-Wan does win, but he doesn't kill Anakin. He leaves Anakin forever changed. His fate is set on a new path, a different path, I guess. And I don't know. I think the way that that music is consistently used as a motif is really, really interesting to me, which I've never noticed before this watch.
Well, it's interesting because now that you say that about Obi-Wan leaving Anakin, like he doesn't kill him, he leaves him changed. I mean, you can say the same thing about like the interaction with like Mace Windu um
Palpatine?
and Palpatine too, right?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't kill Palpatine's not killed, but he's forever changed by
Hmm.
that too. So
You could also, well, I think you could argue for Palpatine. It was more, I mean, that's more that I guess he did have a permanent physical change, but that's more reflective of like who he really was, I guess, inside, you know?
so can you not say the same thing about
Yeah,
Anakin and Darth
yeah.
Vader?
He's
I
just
mean,
totally cut up, more machine now than man, you know?
right.
It's
Yeah, and then versus like think about who what's his name? Dooku was killed, right?
hmm
So I mean, just again, interesting. Well, and yeah, again, if you watch Clone Wars and stuff, Darth Maul
hmm
rises again,
right.
so he's different, but
hmm Which is this whole epic thing with Obi-Wan and like I that's really I highly recommend that. If you have to watch if you don't watch anything else from the Clone Wars, watch all the stuff with Mandalore and with Darth Maul because those are easily the best parts of the show. But yeah, I do think like the Clone Wars is highlights this that and Star Wars in general has always been like big on world building because like every character, every creature, droid, gadget, planet, they all have this backstory behind them, right? Like you, from between Count Dooku to the random guy that sells tries to sell death sticks to Obi-Wan, they all have this backstory. They all have at least a name, and that's one of the things that makes Star Wars so unique and so full of life. And it's I think the prequel trilogy is where they excel at this the most, especially in all the content they've added to that era since then, which it is one of the big reasons people have come to love them so much. Um, but I think the world building might be at a series best there, and it might even be at a level that's only rivaled by like Tolkien and I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons or something. Game of Thrones. I have no idea.
there are no NPCs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Neither the originals or the sequels or the eras they take place in have gotten the same amount of spin-offs in games, books, shows, whatever that I think the Clone Wars have. And just the amount of love that's been given to this era since then has, I don't know, I think that's a part of what's spurred on the change of mind, I guess, as of
of,
late.
of people's opinions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be so curious too, though, whether because the Clone Wars are mentioned in Episode 4. I mean,
right.
I fought with your father in the Clone
Planting the
Wars, right,
seeds
Obi-Wan?
since 77.
Yeah. So, but I'd be so curious to know what was in Lucas's head at that time. Like, how
Yeah,
much did
because
he
Clone
really?
Wars, that could mean anything.
Oh, it
Like,
could.
who are
I
they
mean,
cloning?
right. Yeah, because I mean, when I saw the prequels for the first time and their actual clones, like for whatever reason, that was not even like in my brain process.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wait a minute, the Clone War. Oh, they're clones. Oh, okay. I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not always the brightest, bulb in the batch, but like, I'm generally smarter than that.
If it makes you feel better, I literally realized exactly that today when I was watching it. I was like, oh, 'cause
Oh,
they said
that's
like a
why they
line
call it
out
that.
of like Boba Fett's dad like requested like his clone is
Hmm.
like exactly the same or something like that. I was like, oh, I was like, I thought these were just random people in an army. I was just like, okay, I don't know where clone came
See,
from. I'm
clearly
like,
you haven't watched the Clone Wars.
I know, right?
Yeah, but yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Just the whole idea of clones is interesting too, and they did a whole thing with that uh throughout the series as well, just how they're soldiers bred for war, and they make a whole thing of that. They become very that's another aspect that becomes more interesting in the stuff that's not actually in the movies, which is a lot of it.
I think with
But
that too is because like with like the shows like the Clone Wars and even like the Bad Batch, I want to
mhm,
say,
yeah,
and I feel like there was something else, but I don't know. But like people are really loving those shows so much, and they're tied into the prequel movies. So I feel like that's why now
yeah,
everyone's saying the prequels are kind of the, they're more
yeah.
their favorites
Yeah.
because of the
And
stories
I
that.
think a part of it too is that the people who grew up with the prequel as the prequels were coming out are I mean they were kids at the time, so those were like their thing. Just as the generation that were kids when the originals came out grew up and those are the thing. And I mean, yeah, they have maybe it's rose-tinted glasses, maybe they just have more love for it. I don't know, but they've grown up and now those are their favorites. And so some people make the argument that the kids who grew up with the sequels are going to grow up and the whole cycle's going to repeat itself, which I'm skeptical about, but again, that's an episode for another day. Yeah, I still do think the prequels have a lot to love about them, Sith especially. I did have an interpretation of it, which I was so excited about after as I was watching it. I'm thinking to myself, Revenge of the Sith is like a post 9/11 take on Star Wars. I felt like because like, you look at the originals, they're fighting against this totalitarian government and they're just trying to fighting the evil empire, but now they are the government and it's about their way of life being challenged with like the separatists and the clone wars. The chancellor gets kidnapped, and so because their way of life is challenged, propaganda gets used to gain power and make a totalitarian government. Like it's the war on terror, you know and but I was kind of deflated because I looked it up and George Lucas said that the script had been completed like before 9/11 happened. But
Mm.
I do still think the parallels are there.
You know, everyone I know Solo was, I mean, that's a whole episode in of itself too, right? Whether or
Yeah,
not, the whole debacle, the directing debacle of that movie and whatever, but like, and how Han Solo had always been an endearing character, even though he was kind of a jerk.
of
But
course. He's the
um,
cowboy.
I'm surprised. I don't know if either of you are surprised at all, but like, it's a little surprising to me that no one has asked for more of a backstory of Leia from the time that Bail Organa and his
Hmm.
wife adopted her to when we finally see her as a senator, in episode 4.
And for better or more likely worse, we kind of got a bit of that in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney
Okay.
Plus.
Right, but
All
she was
right.
like
She
five,
was
whatever.
little. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that. I think I intentionally forgot about that
Blocked it out of
because
your
it
memory.
sucked so bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, hold on.
Amen.
Oh,
I
that
like
little.
that show.
Oh my
Okay.
Uh,
gosh. Oh yeah, that's another
it's
episode.
just
But that little
it is.
girl, that little girl was
If
Like,
it were the 2000s, she would not have survived. She would have
Oh
gotten
no.
more than
no.
Jake Lloyd levels of
Oh, and
hate.
Hayden Christensen. Yeah, like
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, like you want to have a really bad and bitter soup, just put a little bit of Jake Lloyd, a little bit of Hayden Christensen, and a little bit of that nasty 5-year-old girl who played Leia Organa in, and that is the worst tasting soup in the world right
That's
there.
so mean.
Oh my God.
It might be mean, but it's so true.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, that was horrible. That was horrible. Anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. Yes, you're right. I forgot about that probably because my brain put a
Hmm. A
block
blocker.
on it.
Yeah.
I definitely
Um,
would. I would want to see something with Leia, like
Hmm.
obviously after Obi-Wan, but like before, the original movies, or even like Rogue One, where we see her coming off that ship or whatever. Um, I definitely want to know more about her story,
Oh
like
yeah.
a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I'm sure there has been more in like books, comics, whatever. But I don't know. I need to get more into the Star Wars novels, I think.
well, because she's a Jedi. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, she was supposed to be, but then
well,
she
she was
wasn't.
supposed to be, but like somewhere along the way in her growing up, she had to have kind of like these little Harry Potter moments, right? Where she's at the zoo and the glass disappears, right? So,
Right.
I mean, she had to have something like that.
I mean, Luke
So
didn't.
he
Did
didn't
he?
at all.
We don't
I
know
mean,
that.
I
Well,
We
we
don't
guess
know
don't
I
that.
guess
know
he was
that.
I guess he was a really good shot, which is like something.
Well, yeah, he was one of the best pilots, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I used to shoot womp rats in my
That size. Yeah.
team back home. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of interest. I mean, I keep saying this. There's a lot of interesting stuff in these movies, but a lot of it that is like outside of the movies too. Like Count Dooku is a big one. Like he's set up, he's to be so interesting. Like he was once they say he was once a political idealist. So you start wondering, like, whoa, that's crazy. How did he go from a Jedi to a political idealist to a leader of the separatist army and a Sith Lord? Like what, and they do kind of illustrate that in the Tales of the Jedi show, but I feel like in the Clone Wars they kind of turned him into a little more of a mustache twirling villain, and I don't know, I wasn't a big which I have mixed feelings about, but you kind of see, I think it's very interesting his death in Sith, because when Palpatine tells him to kill him, you just see this look on his face. Christopher Lee does a great job. Just betrayal and fear and all this stuff. And I still remember like reading the Revenge of the Sith novelization. It must have been damn near 10 years ago now. And Count Dooku's just going through his head all the betrayal and how Palpatine was just using him. He was just a pawn. He wasn't actually accomplishing anything despite all his aspirations. And it was such a great description. And they don't illustrate any of that in the movie.
Mm, yeah.
I liked how, I mean, I've made a lot of notes about how much I actually really enjoyed the directing in Revenge of the Sith, which was surprising to me after watching Clones, because most of that I was not a fan. I mean, the use of music was good. Like Across the Stars kept getting cut off early, until finally it was allowed to like fully swell up as they were going into the arena. I thought that was good, but you got all this stuff with color and with times in Revenge of the Sith, like when with the light peering through windows, foreshadowing his descent. A lot of stuff foreshadowing Anakin's descent, but also like the planets too. I think Mustafar is a very hellish landscape, and that's not a coincidence. It does turn out to be like Anakin's personal hell.
Yeah.
Um, but uh I thought, I don't know, George Lucas said like it's like poetry, it rhymes, and I do think there are a lot of parallels with the original trilogy here that quote unquote rhyme. Like you got Palpatine killing Plagueis, talks about how his Plagueis' apprentice killed him after he learned everything he knew. And you have Obi-Wan telling Anakin, "I have taught you everything I know." You have, let's see, not really a parallel, but I said Obi-Wan killing Grievous with a blaster. It's kind of symbolic. It's almost symbolic. Like he says, he doesn't like using the blaster. He goes, "It's so uncivilized," but it's kind of symbolic of the Jedi like being forced to use these uncivilized means where they have to abandon tradition to survive. Uh, Especially in the Clone Wars and even more so after Order 66. We got people like Cal Kestis using blasters and stuff. Um, and I said Anakin's decision to kill Mace is pretty much exactly the decision Luke decided not to make in Jedi.
Mm.
Um, Anakin, yeah, because they're faced with somebody weak and vulnerable, I guess. They're able to make a decision, save them or kill them. And Luke doesn't follow through. Anakin does. And I said Palpatine continues to be Space Hitler, and I do think he was Space Hitler throughout the trilogy. Like he was so you look at Clones, his whole speech, "I love democracy, I love the Republic," as he's gaining like emergency powers. He's so charismatic and so he's a silver-tongued devil. And like you know he's evil, but you understand how he was able to manipulate everybody.
In other words, he's a typical politician.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I think Obi-Wan or somebody said something about politicians, which made me
yeah,
laugh. It was probably Obi-Wan. He's I love Obi-Wan's sass.
yeah.
Like his stance when he shows up on Mustafar, hands on his hips, legs spread. Like, yeah, right here. What do you want? Yeah, I do think they are good, not necessarily good movies, but they're good prequels, if that makes sense. Like I kind of realized what a good prequel is between like two other things I consider maybe even more of good prequels are Better Call Saul and Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, yes.
Which you haven't played Red Dead 1, but
Nope.
2 is a prequel to that. And I think a good prequel, one of the things they can do is contextualize why a character makes certain decisions. Like Better Call Saul context leads to Jimmy making a decision in the finale, which I'm not going to spoil. And the prequels tell us exactly what leads Anakin to make the decision that he does, not just to become Darth Vader, but the decision that he makes in episode 6 when he decides to save Luke. Because again, it's the pattern of not seeing someone he loves get killed again,
Mhm.
right? Like, and because there's that theme. Anakin's not able to save Shmi. He's not able to save Padme. Even Qui-Gon, to an extent, is someone he loved, but he wasn't able to save. And that changes in episode 6 when he sees, for the last time, somebody he loves getting killed right in front of him. And he just says, "No, I'm done with this. I'm not letting it happen again." And
Mm.
I think that's such a strong thing that I think the prequels do reinforce the originals in that way because Star Wars, the prequels, and Star Wars they do have these themes of corruptions and how heroes fall, that kind of thing. But the series is ultimately about family, I think, like at its heart, and that's very much uh reinforced by the prequels.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to again, like what's more effective is a person's imagination more effective than spelling it all out for them? I
Yeah.
mean, because I agree. I think, yes, that's the care. I mean, as you're saying that, I was waiting for you to say something about Godfather, even though that wasn't really a
Oh,
prequel,
yeah.
right? I mean,
It was half a
Godfather
prequel.
2, like it's really was all part of the
How
same book.
Vito
I
Corleone
mean,
became Vito Corleone.
right, right. So, I mean, there's something very powerful to a backstory, but there's also something powerful to
about not
Um,
seeing it.
yeah, I mean, and we could name director after director. I mean, Hitchcock, right? Jaw, like Spielberg with
Spielberg and
Jaws. I
Jaws.
mean,
Yeah.
where you talk about like there was something more intriguing and mysterious about what wasn't shown than what was shown. And so when you spell out all of that, and that's probably
It
why,
removes a level of the mystique,
oh, it does.
is part of
Absolutely.
it.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And so, that's why I think when you introduce some of these new things,
People are reluctant.
yeah,
It disagrees with their
we
what
were
they
talking
put up.
before about the anger, that it was
Hmm.
intriguing to see Anakin get angry and attack, the Sand People. What wasn't intriguing was when he just whined for the whole, first half of Clones. I
Yeah,
mean, and
yeah.
and you're going like, okay, I
Everything on
mean,
Naboo, at least most of it, should have been cut.
oh, yeah, especially him with his little like freaky like X-Men like at the table
Yeah.
cutting the fruit up and
And
all that other
like the Sound of
crap.
Music type in the
Oh
grassy
God.
hills.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't know. The
Yeah. I mean,
sand
it was
flirting.
beautiful, right? It was like filmed
Yeah.
in Italy and like, yeah,
Italy, Spain,
go
all that stuff.
gorgeous, gorgeous setting, absolutely. But
Oh yeah.
like, I mean,
Why'd one of
there
the only
again,
parts of the trilogy they didn't film on a blue screen have to suck so hard?
yeah. Well, yeah. It's like, why did I want this to be a silent film at this point, right? Because everything else looks good, but it sounds horrible because the dialogue is for crap. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it would be, and probably if you search hard enough, you could probably find that someone has done this where they've probably on YouTube somewhere, someone's probably compiled like the best of the prequels, and it's
Supposedly,
probably like an
I
hour.
can't remember which actor it was. It was some actor made like a cut. It's not available to the public. They made like a fan cut of the movies. It removes like 99% of Phantom Menace, a good chunk of Attack of the Clones, but leaves most of Revenge of the Sith in. That's just supposed to clean it up significantly. And
Yeah.
apparently it's a lot better.
I mean, like in fairness to Phantom too, I mean, and Dylan, you and I just went and saw it in the theater a
Hmm.
couple weeks ago. Like, I mean, the pod race part is cool
The pod race is
too.
cool.
That's
I
like one of the
mean,
only parts I actually like in the movie.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so if you take the pod race and you take that final battle with like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, like, and then you could probably like connect all those two things together with some very minimal like sound bites
Hmm.
and like and like it's like what happens at the beginning of of new episodes of a TV series previously on,
Previously on.
right? Like you could do a
Yeah.
previously on Star Wars Phantom
That's
Menace
the whole point of the
leading up.
title crawl, you know?
Yes, exactly. So it would have been a little bit more than the title crawl, but
Hmm.
you know, it gives you a little bit, of context.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what would you say would be like if you had to come up with a top? We've already talked about Phantom Menace, but in the other two, in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, what would you say would be your top scene to
Oh,
remain and top scene to blow out? I
blow
mean,
blowout, no question. Anakin and Padme on Naboo, like
yeah,
everything with it. But
and two, yeah.
yeah, not but keep in. It's actually hard because there's a lot I love in Revenge of the Sith between Order 66 and a lot of him talking to Palpatine, I think is really good. Um, like him at talking about Darth Plagueis at the like weird bubble opera
Mm-hmm.
show thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like the imagery of that because like they're watching a show as Palpatine's doing that, he's literally putting on a show for Anakin to try to sway him to his side. And I don't know, I think the imagery throughout is very good. But if there was one moment in Sith I had to keep, I think the opening's really good too. It's like Top Gun with Star Wars.
I don't
But
know. I love the final fight
yeah,
scene with
I was
Ant
about to say
Man.
that's what I would keep in. No
Oh yeah.
question. The
I
Battle
don't,
of the
I can't
Heroes.
like. I love the third movie, so I do not know what I
Hmm.
would kick out or anything like that.
Yeah.
That is impossible.
Yeah, it's if the entire trilogy was as good as episode 3 is, it would have it would get a lot more love.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's still, the problem is, like, the one part of Sith that like leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth is when Padme's given birth to Luke and Leia. It
She's
all
lost the will to
feels,
live.
yeah, I mean, it feels really forced to me. And
Hmm.
Luke, like,
Yeah.
really? Look, like, and you guys will figure this out one day. Like, you can come up with all the names in the world before you have a baby, and then the baby comes out, and you're like, I have no idea what the hell to name this kid. Like, I just, I mean, so, um, you, yeah, it just
Uh,
felt,
I almost wonder if they
yeah,
should have like set up those name. Well, that might have turned out bad if they set up the names to have like a different meaning beforehand. It's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope.
yeah, but yeah, all that stuff just felt like if there was one scene that I'd be like, I get it because the problem with it is there's so much other stuff interspersed.
Yeah,
I mean, the kind of constant tension between, like, I mean, again, one of the most powerful scenes in Sith to me is when Anakin becomes, like, literally becomes Darth
like
Vader.
the surgery
Yes.
room.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
so oh, it's so
yeah.
good.
That to me is probably one of my favorite scenes in Sith.
Hmm.
But it was happening all right around the same time that Luke and, if I remember
And
it
I
correct,
think
it's been a
I
minute,
like
but
what Lucas tries to do there, like the birth of Darth Vader, the birth of Luke and Leia, and but it's also like the execution could use some work.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah. How about what Kashyyyk was three too, right? With all the
it
Wookiees.
was,
Yeah, I mean, at
yeah,
least it
and like
wasn't Life
I think,
Day, you know.
I think the Kashyyyk stuff is really interesting with the added context, not from Clone Wars, but just everything that like people know happens afterwards, because these people are fighting for Kashyyyk, and then not that long after this movie happens, they're enslaving the Wookiees and making them do all the Empire's work for them, which is, I don't know, something about that's very intriguing to me. Let's see, another music motif. They play the same. They play It's Battle of the Heroes from the opening as they're going through. That might be my favorite opening from the trilogy. Is them in the ships like going through all the stuff. But they play the same music there, or at least similar music there, as they do during Anakin versus Obi-Wan. And the initial track is called the Battle of the Heroes because it's a battle with the heroes doing hero stuff. But then later on, it's a battle of heroes because it's the heroes fighting each other. I like
Yeah,
I wrote down here. I like how we see Alderaan immediately after we see the Death Star getting constructed.
Mm.
That's which I'd never noticed that before. Yeah, I still do think like Luke he did have a few fumbles here and there, but I liked what he did with a lot of the direction of Sith. I'll never get tired of the PowerPoint present transitions in Star Wars, like the slide, the fades, that kind of stuff.
Those are the best transitions ever.
Yeah, they're iconic.
So bad. It's so funny.
Um, but I liked all the stuff with the imagery with the sun, like whether it's setting or whatever, it always it has meaning. Uh,
I
and
like
I
with the ending scene is also the double sunset in Tatooine.
oh
Like,
yeah, it's full circle.
yeah, that's what my favorite part. One of my favorite parts.
Oh yeah, and yeah, the episode 3 has the most to like easily. Um, I think the di it's where the dialogue finds a balance between unrealistic but bad, and unrealistic but like in a poetic kind of way almost. Like again, which there were bits and pieces of in Clones, that some of which I wrote down.
Well, too bad. If Revenge of the Sith was the prequels coming to their own, it's too bad that we can't say the same thing about Rise of Skywalker with the
Oh
sequels,
yes.
For real.
Oh yes.
which is a whole other episode again too.
Yeah,
But
which
yeah,
hopefully we can do next, we can do the originals, and then after that we can do the sequels. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could go on and on about these movies. Like I Star Wars is so important to me, and Dad to you, and maybe a little to you, Emma Jo.
I
But
like
like,
it.
I got the stuff in the background up here and all sorts of memorabilia, but it's and I do love it for all its flaws. And again, like as much as I could talk about it, what have we been at this, an hour?
mm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
No, I mean, I guess even as you say that and the importance of it, one thing that I always think about is, from a communication standpoint with what I do, one of the things that I will say over and over again is always keep people wanting more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like never completely satiate somebody, because if you do, then it's like they're completely satisfied, or they're ticked off because they weren't satisfied the way that you'd like. And so, and I mean, we could go on and on about remakes and all this other stuff. I got really mad, Emma Jo, when Dylan and I were in the theater because they showed a remake of the movie The Crow, which I
Huh.
mean, I'm like, so completely unnecessary. I mean,
And almost
just
potentially
yeah,
disrespectful.
yeah. And so the thing about Star Wars is such a balance there of saying how much is too much and how much is enough. Like, at what point do you let things live in kind
Mm-hmm.
of the iconic nostalgia of people, or do you like just
Mm-hmm.
over saturate the market and like tell everything?
Which, are you
Um,
talking about how they eliminated the mystique with the prequels, or what Disney's done lately with?
well, I mean, definitely what Disney's done. I
Yeah.
mean, and some of it
Like even
again.
Liam Neeson said like they're oversaturating it.
Well, but that's what Disney does. I
Yeah,
mean,
oh
let's
yes.
face it. I mean, they've done it with Marvel. Now they've done it with Star Wars. They've done it with Marvel, and it's like keep people wanting something more. And I don't say, look, I mean, I get that people can like elevate things that are nostalgic for them so that they become almost like untouchable. I'm not that kind of a person, but I think there's something to be said about like why. I mean, and Dylan, you mentioned Tolkien before, and I don't want to go like forever on this, but if you go back and you read some of the backstory that
The
Tolkien had,
appendices.
yes, the Silmarillion and all those other things. Like Tolkien had spent so many years literally building a
Mm-hmm.
universe and a world and a
Yeah.
language,
And
that there was such strategy and intentionality around it. I, as much as Lucas did that
mm-hmm.
in the early part of Star Wars, I don't, all due respect to George Lucas, he is no J.R.
He's
Tolkien,
no
right?
JRR.
And I think the thing is like when things are driven by what has been created versus being driven by popularity, then I think there's a tendency to go super far down. Um and I just think like the more you string people along just because well people like it without intentionality and strategy, I think the more angry people are going to get. And I think Star Wars has become that for people. Is
Yeah.
it's like they're like if you've bled stuff out, like just I've heard people say, like if you're on a horse and it dies, just dismount, right? Like, I mean, this horse is dead. Like, just let it die in peace. But like, I think we're past that though in some ways.
Yeah, I don't think Star Wars is ever gonna die, is the
No, no,
thing.
no. I
But
don't mean that.
yeah, but they do need to just let it rest for a little bit. Like the Acolyte's coming out pretty soon. I don't
Mhm.
nobody everybody thinks that's gonna be pretty not great. Um
Unnecessary. Like
I
I
I
keep
I
saying about everything.
appreciate that they're trying I keep trying to see the good. I appreciate that they're trying to stray away from the sky like the eras they've been sticking to. They're going like High Republic era, a few thousand years beforehand. But it's just I'm tired. I never thought I always say this. I If you'd told me 10 years ago that I would be tired of Star Wars in any capacity, I would have looked at you like a crazy person. I would have I would have been like, tired of Star Wars? Too much Star Wars. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? Or that's impossible. How can you have too much Star Wars? But there's been too much Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's and
I
like I the thing they it's almost a vicious cycle for me. Like I keep getting disillusioned because they keep pumping out mediocre whatever after mediocre whatever. And they finally release a diamond in the rough, whether it's a show or a video game or a movie. Like Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order were chef's kiss masterpieces for me. But a lot they're diamonds in the rough. They're a lot of it's just I don't know. And then my love gets reignited, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, my friends are all talking like some of them are like die hard, like they've been watching Star Wars like since they were kids. So like when all these like shows and stuff were like coming out in the new movies, they're like, "Oh, Star Wars is dead. It's dumb." And then like the games would come out and they're like, "Oh my God, it's
Star
amazing."
Wars is the best
And
thing
like
ever. I love
another
it
dumb
again.
show comes out and they're like, "Oh, it's dead."
Star Wars sucks. It's over.
Yeah. And then like Ahsoka came out and they're like, "Oh my God, it is so back. It is the best thing in the world." And I was
I
like,
thought
keep going
Ahsoka.
back
The
and forth.
thing
And I was
is,
like,
people seem to have really strong opinions on everything, but
mm-hmm.
Ahsoka I thought was like it was all right. Like
I still haven't watched it, but I heard it was good. But like
it's all right.
my friends were like in love with it. They're like, "Oh my God, have you seen this new episode? Like, I want to talk about it right now." And we have to talk about each detail and
Hmm.
everything. And I'm like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Y'all go ahead."
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
So.
Dylan, you and I'd be curious, Joe, too. Like Dylan and I have talked before too about the fact that there are certain things that you watch because we're all of us are probably fall into that category of repeat watches on certain things. Like we'll watch things more than once, right? So, but like Dylan and I have talked about the fact that sometimes when you repeat watch something, it can get either really
It
good
loses some of the
or
magic.
you're like, wait a minute, this sucks. Like this is horrible. Like, how did I think this was good? Right.
Which is why
So,
sometimes I'm scared to rewatch.
right. Yeah. So like I really do want to go back and rewatch Obi-Wan. I want to go back and watch Ahsoka.
Hmm.
Um, I want to go back and watch some of the
Yeah.
Mandalorian and even the tale of Boba Fett and
Yeah,
whatever.
and it's like I don't want to hate any of it. I want to like it. Is the thing. I can't force myself to like it if it's not good.
The book of Boba Fett. Sorry.
The Book of Boba Fett, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, again, I mean, I think there's something to be said about letting things simmer, like you said.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like that doesn't mean like what was it, 20 years give or take of just dead silence. Like there was between Jedi and Menace. Or between Sith and well, not even between Sith and Force Awakens because you had all the shows and stuff. But it just chillax a bit, you know?
Yeah, but it's Disney, so they need to keep
Yeah,
doing all
they
these
don't know
things.
the meaning of the word.
Same with like yeah, like with Marvel and even Disney, like
Yeah.
regular Disney movies. They don't
And
know when to stop.
yeah, Marvel.
Hey, I've got a great idea. Let's do a Lion King prequel. Oh, sorry.
What could go wrong?
Oh God. I saw that trailer and I was like, what are they on right now? I was like, this is
It's
mm-mm.
cocaine.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe if they were on cocaine, it would actually be entertaining. But
Oh, that'd be LSD.
yeah, yeah, just go John Lennon with it.
Yellow Submarine. Yeah, it's colorful and entertaining.
Mhm. But yeah, I mean, just the movies, we could talk about them, I think, for days and days and days. Just not just themselves, but everything surrounding them, the culture, the context, the lore. It's, I mean, and I do plan to have more episodes on different, the next couple trilogies, maybe even the spin-offs. We'll see what happens. But I mean, yeah, I always have notes that I wish I'd been able to go over in these that I'm not able to. But for this, maybe it's because I have notes on two different movies. I didn't take any on Phantom Menace because we were in the theater. But even
Mm,
if we weren't, how many would I have taken?
right.
But maybe it's because I have two movies, but maybe it's also because it's Star Wars that there's just so much to love about them, despite and I mean, yeah, for everything I love about Attack of the Clones, there are like five things that are not to love. But I mean, in the end, it is Star Wars, like at the heart of it, and it you can just tell the movies have this at least some degree of passion behind them. They're Star Wars. They're happy to be Star Wars movies, and I think that happiness it seeps through. Like the audience can feel when there's passion behind a project. And even when the project's not entirely good, like I just watched the 2000 whatever Daredevil movie, which isn't great at a lot of points, but the director, if you watch anything behind the scenes, has a lot of love for the character. And that showed even if the movie wasn't great. And I think the same energy goes for a lot of the prequels.
Well, and again, in a streaming era, it's foreign to you guys because like you never had the experience of like coming home, on a Saturday and someone's got the TV on
I
and
mean,
and you're
we came on the back end of it, I
yeah, but
think.
you're watching what you're watching, right? Like, I mean, we're even in the post cable world because it's mostly, streaming and by choice. But like, I would still say that yes, the original trilogy, and to some degree the prequels. I could come walking in, like Dylan, if you're downstairs and you're in the middle of any of the prequels, I would still stop and
Yeah.
say, oh, what part are you on, like where, like how long I stay and watch it is probably dependent on which one it is, um but the nostalgia of Phantom Menace um probably makes up for some of its misfires as well for me.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the as much as I throw shade at the whole at that and clones, I will still I'm not one of those people who's gone. I'm never gonna watch that again. I just I won't.
Hmm.
I mean, I will
Yeah.
still watch Phantom Menace. I was still as excited to see that in the theater, and share that with you a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
And I may have been if it was Attack of the Clones, probably not. I mean, as excited, but um, so yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, as hard as Star Wars fans are on, everyone who's
It's
thrown
tough
stuff,
love.
they still come back to it. Like, there's still, like you said, like there's just a love there for
Hmm.
Star Wars, and
Yeah, it's so
people are still
important.
going to come back to it.
Yeah, it's so important to so many people. Like I have grown up on Star Wars. I've known Star Wars like since it's
Birth.
just part, yeah, since birth. It's part of me. Like I know Vader is Luke's dad since like I don't know. I know Vader is Luke's dad. Like I don't know what else.
Don't be sacrilegious.
I'm
Fear,
not
I
about
can
to be
feel it coming.
sacrilegious. I was thinking I'm feeling like a John Lennon bigger than Jesus moment. No. I like I it's knowledge that's just been part of me like longer than I can remember, and just for that, like it will always hold a special place in my heart, good or otherwise. Um and like maybe that will go for the next generation of Star Wars kids. Who's to say? But uh
The force has always been strong in our family.
my father had it. Yeah. But yeah, the prequels are, for all their flaws, there is a lot to love, and I think if you really want to, you can appreciate them. You just gotta have the right mindset about it. What do you think, Emma Joe?
No, I definitely, yeah, agree with all of it. Like sometimes when I do watch these things, I just have to turn off my brain and like actually enjoy it and not focus on like the dialogue or the
But
CGI.
if you turn off your brain, I think you can enjoy the occasional moment where he
Yeah,
does something good.
yeah,
Like I said, I think occasionally the dialogue is unrealistic in a poetic way instead of unrealistic in a stupid way.
right. Yeah, but they're all so good. Like I only became a fan like last year, but even before then, like I've always known everything about Star
Hmm.
Wars because of my dad.
It's
But
ingrained in like our
yeah,
culture.
right. Exactly. Like everyone knew, like you said, like Darth Vader's Luke's dad, everything like that. Everyone knew all those things. Like literally half the time those movies would be like background movies for us. I've just never like
Hmm.
paid attention, but like last
Right.
year I got into it and I could like see the genuine like good story they have and everything. Even if there's, like I said, like crappy dialogue, like there's thought behind it, which I always enjoy in a good movie. So, I like them. I'll watch them.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, oh, that should probably do it. Thanks both of you. I think this was a very this was a great talk. I'll always love talking about Star Wars, you know.
Agree. Yep.
Uh so we'll
Thanks for bringing Yoda in, or Obi-Wan, or whoever you want. The old guy.
uh yeah, anytime. I think it's good to have a an elderly point of view. You know,
Elderly.
cross-generational.
Elderly. Holy
Hmm.
shnikes. Yeah. With that note,
With that note, as I end the meeting, he's gonna come up here and beat me. That's not true. That's not true.
I'll
For
hear
I
legal
was
him.
I
if
was
anyone's
actually
gonna
going
make
to
a call.
deliver a very special gift to you, but now I'm having second thoughts.
It's a joke. It's a joke. Nobody call child services. It's a joke. Uh yeah,
All right.
this was fun. May the
Okay.
force be with you, etc.
And and also with you.
Yeah. May thy knife chip and shatter, whatever they say. That's a Dune joke.
It is a dude thing.
You still need, which Dad, you still need to watch part two.
I know, I do.
I have to watch that
All
too, but
right.
well.
Thank you for listening to Pulp Diction.